We're in a race for the human race. We're in a race for the human race.
I think I chose something I cared a lot about alongside with something that I could possibly do. And I had a little bit of the mix of the reality of having to do the project and doing something I cared about, which I think helped it actually move forward. I would say managing a project that takes such a long amount of time is pretty easy to push back and further when you think you have 2 months to do it. You don't. I learned a lot about myself and how I work, and I think that definitely goes over into more of like a college-based education where I really have more freedom, or even a work-based environment where I have to manage my own time and there's not really that constant supervision that I've become accustomed to at the school. My name is Delphine McCann, and my project is about helping the homeless have access to good hygiene.
Hello. So every time I walk past 7th and Washington, I see the same guy. He's very tall and thin with a huge heavy jacket that hits the ground, and he has this rugged mane of hair, a nice beard, and he always has a paper cup rattling with change. And every time you walk by, you can smell that he hasn't been able to take a shower in a couple weeks. This is the case for many homeless people in America, approximately 1.5 million people, who don't have access to proper toiletries or bathroom facilities. So I tried to address this through a toiletry drive, and as you saw, I ended up with a lot of stuff to drop off. And I dropped it off Friday, and I'm going again Wednesday because people kept on bringing stuff, which is really exciting. And it was really fulfilling to be able to help my community in a concrete way. I also, for my project, had to read a mentor text and interview someone. For my second interview, I talked to Ms. Linda Flores-Tober, the executive director at the Elizabeth Coalition to End Homelessness. In that interview, she mentioned the idea of personalism, which is the idea that you can't care about someone unless you know them. I disagree with that. I think the school proved that you really can care about a community and other people without knowing them through this toiletry drive and how much stuff was donated. This idea also bled over into my mentor text, Souls in the Hands of a Tender God by Craig Renenbaum. Within that book, he describes the individual stories of the homeless and how they became homeless and how they have not been able to really escape homelessness. And in that way, I became more motivated. I was able to put a face to the issue I was trying to help, and in a way, it made it more personal to me. And that really motivated me to push through the project and try to make it something that I could be proud of. The book was also written by a priest, which I found interesting because as a fairly agnostic person, I don't consider the religious viewpoint very often. And this book forced me to think about the issue through a religious lens, which I found very eye-opening and very interesting. And overall, through the project, I learned more about myself than homelessness, I would say. I learned a lot about my own work ethic and how I don't like to work, and how I will do all I can not to work, and I will work on not working rather than working, and how I will come up with excuses for myself, for my teacher, and crazy excuses as a way not to do what I'm supposed to be doing. And I found about halfway through the project, had a bit of an intervention, and my teacher sat me down and I created a structure for my project, and really that's the only reason why I was able to present today. Finally getting down on paper what I had to do every day was the only way I could fulfill my requirements. And learning that I feel like will help me in the future through college and through work, knowing that how I need to work and what environment I need to work in. Secondly, I learned that failure is an option, and at that, a viable option at times. And that failing isn't necessarily the worst thing that can happen to you if you use it as a way to improve yourself and to learn more about yourself. I also learned that failing does not make me a failure necessarily. I should not define myself by an incident or event that maybe didn't go as well as I had hoped. And that, especially being a junior in high school, where your grades are all that matters, it's pretty, means a lot when, especially in a year where everything I do is going on so I can get into college and to do this and to that, and my grades are really my defining characteristic right now. And that was great. And lastly, and I think most importantly, I learned that asking for help is a great thing to do when you need it. Whether it's a teacher, parent, or friend, asking for help is something that you shouldn't be afraid to do. And it is something that comes out of strength rather than weakness. Thank you. Are there any questions? Riza, I'm looking at you because you've asked a question for every presentation. Yeah, Ms. McAlevey?
Did you interview any homeless people in your?
No, I had interviewed 2 people. I also interviewed the managing director at the homeless shelter, and I interviewed the executive director at the Elizabeth Coalition to End Homelessness. No, I did not interview
Guy
anyone.
that served in Washington is named Bobby, and if you just want to say hi to him, I'm sure he will.
Yeah.
It is.
Definitely. Yeah.
Where does this stuff go? Like, it's gonna.
Oh.
How's it gonna get distributed?
So they do, they have a shower day every once in a while, and what kind of happens is they distribute it. And most of my donations, if you could tell, were like kind of hotel shampoos and stuff. So they'll give like one of those to each person, but in the case of bigger things, they'll cut it up and kind of distribute them out as people go into the showers. Is that it?
Delphine,
Yes.
why did you decide to focus specifically on the hygiene element?
It's actually interesting. A couple of years ago, I had remembered reading an article a while ago about how hygiene is one of the most forgotten things that homeless people do need access to. How we often think about food and shelter, and while those are very important things, don't get me wrong, hygiene is something that we often forget, so I wanted to draw attention to something that often is overlooked. Yes.
So I know that you're maybe collecting things for a little bit, but is there some place that if we have things as we gather them throughout the year, that we can,
Yeah.
what we can do with them, just take them to the shelter?
Yeah, I just walked in and I gave it to the first person I saw. And that's it. They're open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., I believe. If you look on the website, they have a list of things they need and their hours. So I would check the hours. I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
When I read the pamphlet from the school asking for the drive for toiletries, I was very excited because I said to myself, why didn't I think about that before? Because it really touched me, the idea. But something that always bothers me, and I think that's something that leaves us all hopeless, completely hopeless, to the numbers of the homeless, knowing that whatever we do, if it's food, if it's toiletries, whatever, we're still left with that problem where we don't know how to reach the source of the problem, and that's mental disabilities or lacking of medical attention. And I was really excited when I saw your idea, really, but something's missing in between. I don't know how to...
To comment on that, a lot of other countries, in particular Belgium, does a very good job at keeping the homeless off the streets. And in fact, homelessness is illegal there. And what happens is the states are responsible for making sure no one's left on the streets. So I think it is possible to replicate that kind of system here. I mean, of course, it would be on a larger scale. And in the US, in fact, at Salt Lake City, they created an apartment complex, and they put the homeless in there, and they found they saved money. So they've saved money because they're not having police officers arrest them. They're not having the same emergency care that taxpayers end up paying for. And actually, there have been strides forward, so I would say it isn't hopeless. We are starting to recognize the issue and move forward, which is exciting. Great. Yes. Oh, I was waiting.
Questions, they grow while you listen. My first question is, did you learn anything about the politics of homelessness, or any thoughts that came up with that? And my second question is, in your research, did you find out any statistics about how frequently, on average, if there is such a thing, a homeless person can actually wash themselves in a year or a week or so? And I have one more question, the third one, if you're
going to forget them.
Is I was thinking about medical problems that come up if you can't wash yourself. Any of those questions?
All right. First one, they're often kind of cast aside because it is kind of hard to convince people that they need help. Like, because we do have this notion that they're kind of lazy and they kind of not deserve to be on the streets, but they're not working hard enough. So in a way, politicians have like that kind of loophole where they can say, oh, like they're just not working hard enough. And I think in terms of politics, depending on the state, it does differ. Majority of states they are kind of ignored, and they're almost never on any party platform or political platform.
So, rephrasing what you're saying, coming from outside the United States, one of the things that jumps out at me, at least when I come to this country, is this kind of sense of social Darwinism, that people are left on their own, and if they can't make it, it's their problem. Did you notice anything like that?
It's definitely a pick yourself up by your bootstrap society, which at times can be frustrating, and I definitely agree with that. What was the second question? I don't.
Statistics about how many times they actually get to take a shower.
So I know in Hoboken, they'll have a shower day maybe 3-4 times a week. Thing is, there isn't really a nationwide organization that deals with that. It's kind of more locally based. So, for instance, the book I read about Seattle, they'll have access to it almost every day, and in Salt Lake City they'll have access to it almost every day. But it really depends on how liberal or how accepting the community is in each place, and it's kind of hard to get the numbers on that because often, as Valerie will tell you, then how they count the homeless and how they figure out what the population of the homeless is, it's very iffy. It's not very certain. And the issue with the particular health problems, I mean, overall they tend to have worse health because their initial healthcare provider is emergency healthcare. They don't have a doctor that can visit that. The only time they get healthcare is when they go into an ER. In particular for being unclean, I mean, I honestly don't know what the names of the diseases are, but overall, when you're unclean, you're more likely to get those diseases, as well as you can't get vaccinated and stuff like that. So you're more subject to stuff like that.
The last quick question. If you had a question about homelessness to the candidates for president right now, what question would you ask them?
Yikes, which one? Do I get to come up with a question for each one?
All of them.
Yikes. What would I ask them? I guess, why are you ignoring them? All right. Yeah?
I'm just curious, is there any program in Hoboken that would help homeless people to wash their clothes?
I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if the Hoboken Homeless Shelter has a program, but I don't know. That's really where most of the goods and services for the homeless people really, homeless community really is, I would say. And yeah.
I have a comment actually. And my comment is, I like the humanistic approach that you took, because when people are having a shower, it makes them human, feel human again. So the fact that someone is taking care to go to something that is not the basics, but to their own self-esteem, I think it's remarkable.
Yeah.
In my head went through the community of Hoboken, maybe even asking hairdressers here if they would be willing to give a free haircut, or to make some kind of community work together.
Yeah, and I think not having good hygiene is another reason why they can't really get out of homelessness, because how can you go to a job interview if you're not in a presentable state, I guess. All right. Great. Yeah, I know, I'm having trouble. All right, thank you.